Let's move on. Hangman and MJF opened Dynamite this week with an in-ring conversation. Physical violence had been forbidden, and that, of course, is the kind of stricture wrestlers always pay very close attention to and would never dare disregard. We're going to talk through this promo together. I'll speak for all of us, had a really good time.
We lost our minds. I think we were just like making weird seal noises through a lot of this.
It was such good work. No one's done character work like this on TV for quite a while.
It is so pleasurable to watch two people have a conversation on wrestling TV where it's like you're talking about each other and you're talking about specific issues that you have with each other and you're analyzing each other in an interesting way. And you're not just telling me about something that happened in 1957.
You're using what you know about each other to hurt each other. Like, I like to see it. Because it's like, these men have even though this is the first time they're like really feuding, they've known each other for a long time. They've seen what the other's been up to. They have a lot of ammunition, but they're actually going to use it. That's cool.
Take the 5 years of AEW and let's make that a whole thing, you know? Got a lot of continuity here.
Well, I'll get us started. You guys feel free to just jump anywhere you want, but I'll start by saying, so MJF kicks off this interaction, and he starts by talking about when the company started in 2019, and he's talking about how, from the beginning, he says, Hangman has been the golden boy who can do no wrong, and it was predetermined that he would be the good guy and that he would, like, get things like the championship, and that wasn't true of MJF, even though MJF is so good at everything and deserves everything. What did you guys think about this as an opening sally?
He's the rich guy who like wears the scarf and brags about being like, you know, he's above everybody else, but it was very funny to be like, you had everything. You did all the nicest stuff. Everybody just lets you in. I had to work my way through school.
I think at one point he said like, and I earned with a scarf and a dream.
Yeah, this was one of those things where, like, I liked him kind of recapping their history where it was like, oh, in that first battle royale, you know, whatever, from 5 years ago, like that was fun to remind us of. But yeah, whenever they go to this sort of, and MJF did this they all did in the Four Pillars thing too, where it's like, you're Tony's specialist boy, and like, I earned it, but you just Tony loves you for no reason. It's like, okay, like, that's not the most helpful. Like, but, you know, overall.
I thought this worked here. I thought it worked different. I thought it worked better for me because the thing that he's accusing Hangman of is not like, I felt like in the Four Pillars feud, it was just like Tony's favor was the thing that they were all arguing about. And it sounded very much like, why does mom like you more, you know? But for this, what MJF is saying is that everything comes easy to Hangman, that everybody wants to help him and nobody wants. And that, for me, that hits a lot better because it's like at the root of all of this is he's saying you get handed things that no one ever wants to give me.
Yeah, to me, it still came across too much as like people give you things even though you're not that talented, which I just think is not very accurate for Hangman. So I didn't like it as much.
It's not accurate for Hangman, but I did think it, unfortunately, even though it's not always my favorite thing to hear, like, as it fits MJF's character because he sees the world that way. Yeah. Like, that's a preoccupation he has, is like, I don't want other people to be loved more than me. And I thought it worked that Hangman was like, I don't want to engage with this topic on your terms. Like, I want to address the actual thing that you're thinking, which is that you're mad that even though you have, like, you know, won the belt and you've, like, you know, you used your Burberry scarf in your dream and you hauled yourself up onto the red carpet and you're, like, a really big star now, like, you're mad that you're still not happy. That's what this is about. You're mad that you're not happy.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good, like, it took something that could have been really boring and was like, no, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what's really happening.
Yeah. Hangman did a great job of ignoring and being like, because it was a conversational gambit that Hangman couldn't ever win. You know what I mean? Like, because if Hangman had tried to be like, actually, I've worked really hard for things and, you know, like, I've tried, like, there's just no way that, like, he could win that particular fight, which is why, like, I think people in the past have failed at promo battles with MJF because they tried to play his game, and it's so good for Hangman to be like, no, I'm not playing your game. We're doing something else here.
That's interesting. I hadn't even really thought about it that way before, but you're right that it's like MJF is always going to lead with, for better or for worse, and I think, but for the character, I think it kind of makes sense. He's always going to lead with something that you're like, this is superficially stupid, but it's because he never talks about like what's actually going on inside his, character's psyche.
Right.
Yeah, well, I do think they both did a really good job of like when they were really gotten to suddenly losing their temper and stuff in a way that was very arresting.
Yeah. Well, and I also thought Hangman's initial counter to this, why are you talking to me like I don't know who you are, was really funny.
That was really good.
Very classic Hangman, who loves to like hear something that's kind of like normal for someone to do in wrestling and hang a lampshade on it in an interesting way. Yeah. That it's just like, people do that a lot. Like, and they kind of have to. But it's funny for you, especially given the rest of the promo, it's funny for you to be like, and I'll call it out, like, why are you standing here telling me our whole history? Like, I know our history. Even though it's good that he said some of the history.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun. Okay, so Hangman says to MJF, he's like, well, you're talking about your successes, but you sound angry, which is a great, like, that's such a great thing to call out, that I feel like you don't have enough promos that are calling out the disconnect sometimes between what people are saying and how they're saying it, or that are like going a little deeper like that. So I really liked that.
I particularly like that this part of the schedule, you called it, if it makes you happy, then why the hell are you so sad?
She knows what she's talking about. And he was like, I think you're upset that you don't have, like, that the crowd, they don't love you. No matter what you do, like, people don't love you. And MJF was like, well, I don't care if am I stepping on?
No.
Okay. Just stop me if you're like, I had more analysis to do there. So MJF was like, he says, I just think it's funny that these hypocrites, the fans, get to determine who is morally redeemable and who's not. These people woke up one day and decided you get to be the main character. You're the good guy. What did you guys think of this approach? I do feel like an English teacher.
No, but I do want to rip this apart, like as if we're in an English class and being like, what I think the narrator was saying here. No, I mean, again, like, I think that there are feuds in which arguing over who the crowd loves more would be very annoying. But I like it. I do like it here because, again, I'm just really obsessed with the idea of MJF being like, you have everything I've ever wanted and you don't appreciate it. And that makes me crazy. It makes me want to choke you out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really works because MJF does so transparently want like admiration and love. And because Hangman does have people, like, MJF kind of called out things people say online, like Hangman's done nothing wrong and stuff, which, like, often I'd usually prefer it if people would pretend they're not on Twitter all day long, but I think it did really work where it's like Hangman does have fans in a way that MJF doesn't. And even when he was saying all the bad stuff Hangman did, the crowd would cheer for each of them in a way where it's like, yeah, that was rad.
I know. I did love that, but at the same time, the part where he was like, and that Hangman did nothing wrong, people, and then the crowd cheered, and it's like, okay, we're not rewarding those people. Those people were very annoying.
Right. Yeah. And incorrect.
But no, I did really like when he was like, and you burnt Swerve's house down, and the whole crowd was like,
yeah. So, and then MJF said, after everything you've done, I've got a question for you. Everybody loves Hangman Adam Page, but after everything you've done, do you love you? Did you love yourself after you ended the career of your mentor, after you absolutely demolished that jobber hack, Christopher Daniels? I have to say, to hear a man say on television, do you love you? That's kind of why I play this game. That's what I come here to feel. Because it's like, you are looking at two people who, like, I think we said this, it's like one thing they have in common is they're fundamentally deeply uncomfortable with themselves, and it just manifests really differently. And MJF is always going to be like, I'm right, and not acknowledge any part of him that's like, maybe I was wrong. And Hangman is like very aware, is constantly being like, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Even when he is Right. And he just gets worse because, I don't know, I don't think I expressed that very clearly.
No, you're absolutely right that he's always second guessing himself so much that he sometimes doesn't act on his own convictions because he convinces himself that he wasn't right about it.
Yeah, and it was so satisfying to watch both characters really expose the like sensitive underbellies or let the other person expose them in a way that is pretty vulnerable really as a performer, I think, it worked so well.
Yeah, it was great. And Hangman did break at this point, and we saw like some of the stuff that's clearly been building over the past few weeks or since that Christopher Daniels match. Like, he just burst out and was like, don't you talk that way about my dad. Don't you ever talk that way about my dad. I know I said I hated him. I know I said I never wanted to see him again. I know I ran away from home, but don't you ever talk that way about my dad. He's worth 10 of you.
Yeah. For MJF insulting Christopher Daniels to be the thing that made, because earlier MJF had broke into like how dare you, an actual really mad thing. But for this to be what had Hangman lose it, is just like so telling about where the character is, and it works so well. And he just went into like a long rant about like how great Christopher Daniels is and how important his career has been and how MJF's nothing compared to him and stuff. And it was like, that's such a great way to express like how bad the character of Hangman's been feeling for the last few weeks about it. It's just really effective.
Right.
Without him saying, I feel so bad about this,
Yes. But it worked amazing because you could see it, like the way that it was such an unbottling, and clearly it's like, this is all the stuff that he's been turning over in his own mind while outwardly being like, well, I am not sorry, and I have nothing to say about that. It's his own rant at himself. It's like, how could you do that to this guy who was such a great wrestler and so important and gave so much to you, but he's yelling it at MJF like, ooh, that's the stuff. Really, 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 really good. Mm-hmm. So then he says, Hangman says to MJF, like, this is Christopher Daniels' legacy. Actually, he's really important and respected. And why do you think you can talk trash about him? Like, if you died tomorrow, what do you think people would say about you? Which is a great thing to say because it's the only thing MJF ever thinks about. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is the only thing that the character cares about a lot of the time, or it's like where he's like channeling all of his stuff is like, how do people perceive me? How do they think about me? Why don't they think about me the way I want them to think about me? Like, it just was so like, that's so like spot on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like MJF's sense of self-worth comes from like being successful, being at the top, like proving that he's like worth existing in the world, and he doesn't think he is, so
yeah. And then Hangman said, you ask why after everything that I've done, these people still seem to care about me. And I'm not going to be arrogant trying to understand it, but I know what's right and I know what's wrong and I tell the truth about it. I've never lied to the fans. If I have had a problem, I faced it head on, eye to eye. I didn't run from it. I didn't hide it from it. I didn't hide from it. It's got to be it. Everything I've had, I've worked for it. And everything you have, you've cheated to get.
Ooh, really good. Really good.
Rough stuff. I thought this was interesting, too, though, because it's like, I was thinking while he was saying it, I was like, do I think that's true? Do I think it's true that you have faced everything head on and that you have never run or hidden from anything? No. But do I think that it's something that you as a character are really preoccupied with and that this is the way it would come out? Yes.
I think it's one of those things where it's not so much that he's always been able to do it, but it's the value that he cares about. Like it's something, it's like it's a quality that he wants for himself and he believes in. Like he thinks that is what like he should be doing, even though he hasn't always been able to do it. He said, I've never lied to the fans. And I'm like, you've lied a lot, actually. Yeah. But I know you value honesty.
Well, and he is a man. It's like he understands. He works towards things. Like he even like sometimes he gets kicked back, but like he has an ideal of himself that he wants to live up to, and it's really crushing to him when he can't live up to it. And it's so crushing that it sends him into these spirals, like depressive spirals, or like into like monster mode that he's been in. But he does care a lot about like wanting to be a person who doesn't run from his problems, even though he does. which is great. And it's great. It's just in general, like, an unreliable narrator is wonderful if they're unreliable in the way they should be unreliable, which I think is what was happening here.
Yeah.
And then MJF hits back by saying he's earned everything he's ever gotten. Hangman can't say the same, so he's kind of returning to the beginning part. And then he says, I talk, look, wrestle better than you. You name one thing you do better than me. Name it. And Hangman says, I'm real.
Yeah.
Which is
Fuck me!
brutal because it's so like
And
it's
that
both
is true.
It's the truest thing he's ever said, and that's why people like consistently identify with Hangman because he's always felt like the realest person in AEW. You know?
Yeah. And has always been the problem with MJF. Like, when MJF's character is working really well, he's fake in a way where you get glimpses of the reality underneath. But when MJF is doing really bad work, he's just like a fake cartoon character, and it like doesn't work badly. So, I mean, it's a really good contrast, like both in a kayfabe sense and in sort of a non-kayfabe sense.
I mean, MJF, when you think about it, MJF is playing like a pretty difficult character, which is why it goes wrong sometimes, because it's very hard to be fake in a way where you just occasionally give people just enough of a glimpse of how you're not fake to like be interested in what's going on underneath the fakeness. Like, it's not an easy thing to perform, and he isn't always good at it. Yeah. But when he is good at it, he's great at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like in this promo, he was great at it.
In this promo, he was great.
It's been a while since he's been great at it, but this was working.
And they got to the thing that was like, oh yeah, this is the best possible thing that you could highlight between these two characters is that one of you is always himself, for better or for worse, and the other one is terrified to like be himself and take, you know, whatever people have to say about it. And so is constantly like, you know, actually running and hiding and like being somebody else and performing.
Yeah.
Man, really.
It's good work.
Stuff.
It's really good work.
It's really good work.
There were so many lines in this that I was like, yes, that is what you should have said, which so often I'm like, it was a good promo. Here's what I would have done. In this, I'm like, no, everybody, you both were doing your best possible work. Like, I think it's like a thing where it's like when you work with Hangman, you just have to rise to meet his level.
Yeah. I know. I think I said while we were watching it, I was like, oh, it's really boring to say. So, you know, sometimes like we actually don't say it as much anymore, but it's like Hangman is the best. Yeah. Like he's really fucking good at being a person that you care about and that you're interested in and that you like want to chew on his little brain like beef jerky.
In the entire time that we have been watching wrestling, I have never said, I don't know what he wants or what he's scared of. Like, no matter what his character was doing, no matter what, like, heel, face, anything, he always communicates. He always manages to communicate, like, what's going on with him. And he's not afraid at any point to be like, this is a weakness. This is, like, what's going on with me isn't, like, the brightest, like, the strongest, you know, manliest thing. Like there's really real things wrong, you know, whereas, you know, so many wrestlers are just like, I love to win.
Yeah, he has like such a good handle on his character and he is good at expressing it. It's like him and I think Eddie is also really good at this where it's like has a vulnerability and a realness to them that really works and I think always has like a continuity and it's easy to be on side with them. And I think that's why, I mean, they're two of the best baby faces when they're in that mode.
Yeah. And it's like, it is really difficult. You know, you do have a lot of wrestlers who are like, I need to perform absolute confidence in myself. And I'm not going to give you any indication that I ever question it. And it's like, oh, well, that's very boring. It's very boring to just really believe that you're the best and never worry that you're not
right. It's like what Ian said last week. It was like, oh, my character in this TV show is going to be a high schooler. And it's like, okay, well, it's set in a high school, so you really got to do something else for me.
Gonna have to distinguish ourselves a little more than that. Yeah, and it's interesting too because I think Swerve's also in that cadre of like really great storytellers. But his character is much less like obviously vulnerable, I think, but he still manages to have a lot of character continuity and interest, which is it's just interesting to watch how they do that and keep their persona interesting.
Yeah.
And you can see in this one too, where it's like they showed their vulnerabilities by when they lost their temper. So it's like
Swerve does do that.
Swerve
is
absolutely
really
does
good
that.
at that.
Really good at it, yeah. And I feel like other people should be looking at that when it's like you're performing tough guy, and how do men show when they feel out of control? It's like when they start screaming at people, you know.
Right, which is one of those things where it's like, and you can get there, but you have to show not there. And then you get, you know what I mean? Like when you come
modulate your tone.
Right. When you come into the ring yelling at me, I don't think, oh, this man has lost his temper. I'm like, oh, this man is yelling at me. You know, like you have to.
Exactly.
You can do
You've got to have an exchange where you're being like, oh, I'm calm and I'm in control and I'm burning him. And then suddenly I'm really mad because he's hit a nerve.
Thing. Right. This specific thing is what has set me over the edge. That's interesting. I'm locked in.
And you can do it the opposite way, too. You can have somebody who's really loud and screams, and then when they actually get upset, they get really quiet. You can do it in both directions, but everything can't be the same tone throughout. Right. That's where we have a problem.
It's really, you're showing that external things affect you, that you hear what the other person is saying and you're reacting to it. Not to be like all acting is reacting, but it's like that's when you see who a character is. It's like what gets to them, what makes them change how they're presenting themselves.
And it's great to watch a promo like this where you leave like thinking about the characters in a new way. Like I left thinking more about like Hangman, you know, being like, I never run from my problems. And it's like, sometimes you can be very impulsive about confronting external problems, but it's because you're on the run from yourself internally. Yeah. That's what's happening. You're running inside yourself. And then also I left thinking about MJF and how, like, you know, we say, what do you want? What do you fear? And like with MJF, a lot of the time it's like, what do you want? It's like kind of like the crowd to love you. But it's like, I left this being like, you want the crowd loving you to feel good. Like you want something to make you feel good, and nothing does.
You have a giant hole inside you and you're constantly trying to feed it and constantly trying to figure out what will make you stop like hungering for something. You won the title, you had the crowd, you had you've had things and they were never enough. Nothing was ever enough.
Yeah. Because wherever you go, there you are.
Wherever you go, there you are.
That billionaire's problem where it's like there's no amount of money that can make you feel okay with yourself, and so you just try to keep collecting more and more of it, and more than you could ever spend. And
it's really, wrestling is interesting when it makes you think about life, in my opinion. But anyway, then Hangman said, I'm real. MJF said, you know what? You can be the main character all you want. I've got no problem being the bad guy. A lie. Kind of true. But you know what I mean? It's like it's just really good. They get into a little back and forth. MJF spits on Hangman really nasty, wet. Like really obvious on camera, which is impressive.
It was one of those things like the toilet paper on Ricochet where you're like, wow, that ended up looking great on camera, and there was no way you could have you were doing it on purpose, but it everything serendipitously.
Yes. It's kind of like you're like, I'm sure that I've seen someone spit on someone else other times on TV and it just didn't work as good by accident, so it doesn't stick in your mind. But I'm like, I'll never forget this spit.
Do you remember on the Kevin Steen show when Chuck Taylor told the story about Adam Cole spitting?
No.
And he took a sip from a water bottle and went to go spit it on Dustin and accidentally horfed it back into his lungs and started choking. And so the crowd around him started chanting, "You fucked up, you fucked up." And Dustin was like, I think that's the first time anyone's got a "you fucked up" chant for trying to spit.
Oh, wrestling. Inherently silly. Okay, so even though they weren't supposed to get into a physical altercation, Hangman had been pushed to the edge, tried to attack MJF. MJF fled. Security held Hangman back. Christopher Daniels came out to the ring and was basically being like, whoa there, horsey, no.
Right as Hangman was like mid-punch. He punched like 5 security guards down in a row, and then CD was right there, and he had to stop.
Is this who I said my horse thing about? Is this when I said that Hangman was a wild stallion and Christopher Daniels was the teen girl who was taming? Horses again, stables again.
Someone in the crowd yelled, "Don't punch your daddy, Hangman."
Yeah, someone in our Discord channel pointed that out, and I went back to go listen to the clip and absolutely hollered, "Don't punch your daddy, Hangman."
So fucking funny. And
Hangman looked devastated when suddenly Christopher Daniels was right there and he had almost hit him again. Like,
oh my god, I thought you were insinuating he looked devastated when he heard that person yell out from the crowd.
I mean, probably,
right.
I shouldn't hit my daddy.
It's quite sexy to like for him to have had all of those roiling feelings of shame and guilt, and then they come out in this way of like defending someone that he himself has refused to apologize to or defend. But now it's clear to everybody suddenly that he's been walking around for weeks being like, I'm a piece of shit. I'm a piece of garbage. How can I do this? I think he said he was like, if I could rip out my spine and give it to Christopher Daniels, I would. And it was like, wow, someone's had some sleepless nights. Someone is really not doing good.
Someone filled with regrets.
Oh my god. And Christopher Daniels said, don't listen to MJF. I know who you are, and you know who you are. I did think this was gilding the lily a little. This was over-egging the pudding a little.
I knew why they did it, because it's wrestling and you can't rely on the acting to show you. But it was Hangman, and all I needed was his facial expression, and the words were just like, okay, I get it. Like, no.
It's
like,
rather in wrestling. Sometimes you clearly they're backstage and they're like, okay, so then you'll just look at me, and it's like, is Dave Meltzer going to understand that? You better say it. You better say something.
I know, it would have been the perfect moment if it was just like suddenly CD was there and stopped Hangman from punching a security guard, and then they just looked at each other, and then Hangman pulled back and left in a hurry. That would have been
away
like
in shame.
Yeah,
with that expression on his face, like I am a piece of shit. Yeah,
that would have done it for me. But I get it. You got
right.
Like, Joe Lanza's never going to get it otherwise.
Get their asses. These men are on the chopping block this week. We're coming for you. We're saying you don't know how to read a facial expression. And that's why we have to watch some of the shit we have to watch. It's because of you. I've taken off my glasses. I got to put them back on before I can see what we're supposed to talk about. Oh, and then Christopher Daniels became the first man in AEW history to show a moment's kind concern for a security guard. He like patted a security guard and like was just like, like clearly being like, this has been rough. I'm sorry. You get back to catering. Have a drink. It's okay. Daddy Daniels has you now. And I thought that was nice, even though I thought his three-piece suit looked a little silly this week.
I did too, but I really was like really touched, where I was like, thank you. At least someone acknowledges the fact that these poor working men.
Hopefully Dustin's hard at work unionizing.
Yeah, hopefully they're really going to make some strides backstage in terms of union rights.
When all the security guards started coming out, it did tense up, and I was like,
I know.
If we had Dustin unionizing the security guards as one Abed back of camera plot, and then Christian and Cope arguing and considering whether or not to kiss again as another like back of the shot plot, we'd really be cooking. I mean, that could fill out. It would just be a little something for the eye to land on if the promo at the front of the screen wasn't landing. All right. Anything else you want to say about Hangman and MJF, who will fight at Revolution?
Okay, I'm at my leisure to see it. They've certainly worked me up.
Yep.
Thank you for doing some interesting psychological work that adds nuance to your characters. It makes me think about you in a richer, deeper way.